Hello, everyone. My name is Tyler Selhorn, and welcome to another episode of Speak Easy, the podcast where we discuss communication, productivity systems, capturing our best ideas, and how we share those insights with our future selves and others. Thanks so much for listening. Speak Easy is brought to you by Cleft. With our cross platform applications, you can simply speak your mind, and Cleft will collect your thoughts. Cleft enables you to process verbally wherever you are and send your best bits later. Today, we are blessed to be learning out loud again with Cleft founder Jonny Cosgrove. Jonny is back on the podcast to give us an update on Cleft's progress. He'll discuss what we've been working on, the feedback we've received from users and customers, and what's next for Cleft. Consider this episode a peek behind the curtain to see what we've been up to and where we're headed next. Jonny, thanks so much for allowing us to capture your thoughts here today. I'm curious, we've been talking to all these people interested in speaking their minds and having Cleft collect their thoughts. What happens with all that feedback and ideas that people have been sharing with us as we co-create Cleft with them?
Straight into the good stuff. Thanks for having me back, Tyler.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so I mean, the last time we caught up was August or September, give or take. But
Yeah, for those interested in binging the Speakeasy podcast, we'll put the link in the show notes for Jonny's first episode. I know for me, like, you really kicked us off so well, like the honesty and vulnerability that you demonstrated. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like the first time that you like went really public with the fact that you are autistic and ADHD, like all at once, like you've talked about that before, but like saying it with your chest to the world was on that episode. Am I right about that?
one, I didn't let you know that, and 3 minutes before the call, I decided to remind myself of that while I was having a quick cup of coffee, and was like, yeah. So that
Well,
was
I know for me, like, I'm incredibly grateful to be in this space with you, like building Cleft, like for users like yourself that are seeing the computer as a teammate, as a companion, as assistive technology. Like that's become a theme of the Speakeasy podcast, in part because that's the product that we're building, but also in part because of the way that you demonstrated what that's like to be a person that is using technology to help them be the best person they can be. And that's the kind of products that we're trying to build at Cleft.
there's no shame in building something by us and for us, and that's pretty much
100%.
why myself and Justin kicked this off, and you joined us on the journey to make that change. So
Yeah, here we
yeah,
go. Okay. We've been getting all this feedback. What are we going to do with it?
we've gone through what every company and every person probably listening in goes through, which is, what do I do after a meeting? And that's fine on an individual basis, but what Tyler you're asking, just to make sure I'm getting it right, is what do we do as a company?
Yeah.
Have we actually made this usable? Because we went through the same barrage that everyone goes through, going through all the different tools. I'm not going to name and shame anyone, but bring it back. What we use is Google Transcript, because we
Yeah.
use Google Meet for our meetings, and we use Google Workspace for lots of different functions in our business. So of course we'd look at trying to keep things in-house for what makes sense. And Google Transcripts and recording works quite well. But
Agreed.
where we hear it from our users, because it's one of the number one questions. How can we use Cleft for meetings? And it
Cleft for meetings. Oh my gosh. I remember one of those early conversations that we had, and we were like doing the Cleft is blank and Cleft is not blank. I think we even said things like Cleft is not for meetings. And I think that's probably still where we land, but we have also wanted to adapt to that feedback that people are using. Like people are using Cleft for meetings. So yeah, tell us more.
Yeah, well, actually, on that really quick one, it's not the standard people are using Cleft to record their entire meeting. Like, that's, as I already
Yep.
said, there's lots of tools that do that really specifically, and they still have a lot of way to go to make it better. But what people use Cleft for in meetings is they might take an action note, or they might take a quick reminder, or they might say, hey, gang, let me just make a quick Cleft here of what we just discussed and make sure we're all on the same page. And that's a quick snippet. It's part of a meeting. Or the number one use case for Cleft plus meetings is after the meeting.
Yeah.
That quick brain dump that applies for what just really happened in the meeting, as opposed to trying to go back and do the transcripts job. So that's been really, really interesting from a user behavior point of view. But what we actually end up doing is, after going through all these different tools and different systems and trying to figure out the best way to do it, we brought it back to basics, and we do it ourselves. So we, after a customer meets us, we get a transcript of the call. We've agreed all this beforehand to be very clear. We're all on the same page. We're there to co-create with our customers from day one. And whether it's making sure that we create the shortcut that we all agreed we were going to build afterwards, that kind of thing, and really going into the deep of going, what did we all actually want that to do at the end? So with all that in mind, we get a ton of text data that we want to do something with. So what everyone's familiar with, if you use Google Meets or any of these tools, you get a transcription sent to you after your call. That might send chills up some people's spines if it's too early in the morning.
I
So
I
apologies.
I'm one of those users that, like, just hates all the time codes, all the filler words, all it's those transcripts are it's nice to have a recording that you can always go back to, but it's not very easy to use right out the gate, right, with that stuff. It's just not for me.
Yeah, and it's not for most people, to be honest, including most of this is machine readable right out the gate. So that's where we take advantage of that. We'll do that across a number of different notebooks or tools, but let me just talk about one thing for today, which is
Yep.
Google Docs. Make it simple. So we'll open a Google Doc. We've got a template built up internally, and we open that. We dump in the transcript, which has either been sent on to us or they'll put into a folder. And for some of the more pro users, yes, there are ways of automating it, but I see such a drop in quality that we do it a different way. So, long story short, you open a few tabs, you have particular prompts and instructions. So, actually, hang on, let me step back up a second. I'm getting into the weeds. We use the machines as co-companions. We work together to say, hey, how can we get the crud work out and just make sure that Elf and Tyler can have a conversation after I've met a really interesting customer who's given me a head scratcher of a how do we make that into a shortcut? That's usually what it turns into. So we want to get to the meat, not spend all day doing administration and saying who said what. So a lot of these systems that people use, and there's some awesome ones out there that let you just get a quick summary out. But if you want to get into the depth and start to turn this into, and Tyler, you've spoken on this in public a lot more than I have about using what you learn from your customers and not just into new product features, not just into new obvious revenue lines, but into saying, hey, every question could be content. Every question could be a gap that we could close. And
Yeah.
that's the way we approach it. If you want to
Yeah,
give a little bit more on that.
I'm a huge fan of the process of treating every conversation as the voice draft of new documentation, a feature brief, like who knows what it ladders up to, right? As you start letting it mature, right? But that first reply to the customer, like in our case, like very often it becomes a shortcut or it's a automation or it's in addition to our snippets that we send to customers when we get that same question again, like it'll become something that we can just automatically use and you don't have to like keep thinking up those words again. Like you record it once and then you ship it, right? Now it's reusable and reusable by customers without even having to ask us because it's like you can just search Google and it'll give you back from our help site what they were looking for in the first place. So I think that process of taking the voice draft of our conversations and letting that become the zero point 0.1 of a whole bunch of different things, it's really, really powerful to do that.
In the same way, my favorite interruption in a customer call is when we stop what we're doing. We get the customer to make their request using Cleft there and then, and they copy and paste that onto our public feedback board so
Yeah.
that we can get this right back into our team. That comes back into our Slack. That's a full circle. And the same thing applies when it comes to our meetings. We also try to, as I said, we get ahead of things. If a customer brings up something really interesting, we don't let that maybe go somewhere else afterwards. We do that live on the call. So when it comes to going through this process, so we've got our transcript, we've got everyone's got their own way of doing these things, but we put it into about 5 to 10 different tabs that all have different expected outputs. And we apply a prompt with one of the LLMs. Everyone's got their preference, but I love cloud or I love doing it offline. So whichever the case may be. But all you're really trying to do is get very specific with these things. Yes, in the essence of speed, you can do a master prompt and you can set your custom instructions to do whatever you want. I have found through well into the hundreds, manually testing these things out over the last few months, but manual is still best and doing it specifically and getting more, getting specific with your prompts is important. Let's just look at where LLMs are right now. They're people pleasers. They're fantastic at trying to fill the gaps because they're not very good at saying no. I don't have the answer to that. And you've got to apply the human brain here and say, hang on, this is why I still exist. I've got to check the work. And that's something I just want to shout out that's why everything isn't perfect yet. It's there. Today, it's better to say, hey, I have one that's going to give me a summary of a meeting. I have another that's going to give me action items from the meeting. I have another tab that lets people say, hey, we want to raise these product tickets. And my favorite tab is the content tab, which is, right, what's some good content ideas that came out from there? down to FAQs, right up to, hey, that's definitely a video guide we got to make this week, not next week. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the thing that you talked about, these different outputs that happen inside of the meeting, and you're feeding the machine the same data, right? But you're asking for different outputs. And I think that's one of the things that I think is the best use cases. And this is like Cleft, the product, is feed a bunch of context to the machine. And then you say, give me something back. And very often in Cleft land, it is to say, here's my idea. Here are my like thoughts. Here are my ramblings about this idea. I have the seed of an idea, and very quickly you get the first draft of that idea. We're talking about voice draft into first draft sort of spaces, and that's what Cleft does really well. I guess I'm curious, based upon like these experiences that we've had. We've had these requests coming in from customers, and we're seeing where people are taking that first draft, right, that they're getting from Cleft, and then they're sending it on to other places. And I guess maybe what has been our learning when it comes to what is coming next from Cleft? Because Cleft isn't like perfect or anything, but it's pretty good at doing that voice draft to first draft thing, right? Very often, like people aren't just sitting with that first draft and that's it, right? Because they want that. We want to make it easy for you to take your first draft and send it on to the next thing. What are we going to do next now with Clef? We want to help you do what with the first draft of things?
Well, let's pick on ourselves here for a second, Tyler. Let's talk about somewhere that we know Cleft doesn't work so well on that first draft.
Yeah.
So before we go to that, let me just interrupt here for a sec. One of the things we've learned is not just a help. So one of the most important things we've learned that applies to your question here as well is how people are using Cleft. It's not just to draft and get that first point out. A draft is when you're trying to gather your thoughts, when you're trying to get something into something more, and we'll talk a little bit more about that next step later. But the filtering aspect of Cleft is huge. I know for me personally, it's fantastic that I can rubber duck with Cleft sometimes before I bring it back to team. Because where we know it doesn't work, look, one of the biggest things we've learned about Cleft, that it's not just for collecting your thoughts, it acts as a great filter for your thoughts. When you're trying to get into the nuts and bolts of it, it's fantastic having those amazing shower thoughts and capturing it really quickly. But what we found people have asked for most is, what can we do with that? And what can we do with your notes later? Not just connect it to Zapier, not just send it to a flip. By the time this comes out, I think Notion will be released. And it's about getting those thoughts filtered out. That's what we found.
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting to hear you referencing going all the way back to the Yak days with Justin and I, really just trying to allow for people to do that verbal processing and allow time for your executive function or Cleft's executive function to filter which ideas actually ought to be sent on to others, right? It might have been just for you to think out loud. Something, someone, or whatever is listening, right? And is going to reflect back what they heard you saying, right? And Cleft is way better than a rubber duck, right? Because Cleft actually transcribes your words. You can have all of those words right there in the transcript. If there was something special in there that you said and you need to pull out verbatim what it was that you said. And it's also going to reflect back to you what it heard you saying. It's going to summarize and organize those thoughts into a note that would be easier for somebody else to catch on to. It's that assistive technology. It's that companion. It's that sidekick to your thought process and helping you to power up. Mario is great, right? When he first appears on screen, but as soon as he mashes that flashing question block, right? And out comes the power mushroom, right? Super Mario is even better. And that's what we're trying to do with Clef. We're trying to be the power mushroom for you as the hero or heroine of your own story, right? We want you to be able to walk around with an extra life, got what you need to be able to succeed by having a partner that is listening, that is trying to figure out what it is exactly that your idea was. And yeah, now we want to take that idea and we want to send it off someplace else, right? It might be Notion, it might be Obsidian, it might be some other endpoint. What are some of the endpoints that you've heard people like sending those thoughts on to, right? Obviously, we talk about inside of our own team, right? sending it into Slack or into GitHub, right? All these different places that these thoughts and ideas and insights might be. But it sounds like what I'm hearing you say, Jonny, is that there's something else brewing for Cleft where we're going to send things in the future.
Yeah, well, number one, check the cookbook. That's where a lot of the straight, I want to download a shortcut, I want to get a zap to do this, that, or whatever. That's already in there on the website. One of the dreams we had at the beginning of starting this all was building software and products that didn't just help people, but actually became things like workplace accommodations, became things that people really, became part of the system. And one of those dreams has already come true in terms of they're the requests that we're starting to get through some people already. And with that, we're listening to our customers, and people love Cleft. People love that we've built a digital field book, notebook, whatever you want to call it. It has a purpose, and that's to help you capture. That's what we built Cleft for, and we didn't want to go beyond that in terms of making it into something it wasn't supposed to be. I've had over 200 people have me face-to-face promise this will not become an everything app, and we don't want to do that. So that sort of a sneak peek, and this might be out by the time we get out there, but we have been working on a new product. What Cleft is to capture or is to authoring. And we've really heard a lot of people who want to have a tool that helps them write better, to put it very, very simply. And that is something that our closed beta is going out quite soon on that. But it's got the same essence as Cleft had, which is this is a writing tool that doesn't stress you out, that isn't about overloading you, that's about more writing, less executive function dysfunction. Um, and that's become number one, come from our users and what they want to do with that.
Okay. I love what you just said, that what Cleft is, say that again for us. Cleft is to
What Cleft is for capture, Amber is for altering.
What Cleft is for capture, Amber is for authoring. I love that phrasing. I'm a sucker for some alliteration and assonance inside of like brand names and all that sort of stuff. So I'm very excited to be helping our authors. Obviously, we've been talking about using the transcript tools that exist inside of our workplace software to author some better like post call meeting notes, right? And just stuff there. But what else are we seeing people do? Like, what is it that we want to see people accomplish when we're thinking about Amber being for authoring?
Well, to try to sum it up, it's that everyone's got a writer in them. And that was one of the big things behind Cleft originally was it's to help those who might verbally process as opposed to click and clack quite the same way. That was a big driving point for this, was just to bring it back to simplicity. And we have a lot of people who are writing, and they were trying to do more with what Cleft is actually for, and they wanted someone to send their notes or send their thoughts. We didn't want to go and venture into the personal knowledge management space. We were really just focused on saying, look, there's loads of stuff out there for that. I still use Obsidian. I've got it open here over beside me for looking at something else for later. All these tools have a place, but where Justin will definitely talk about this more in the future. I'm sure, you got to get him on here and have a chat about this. I know he really wants to get in and share that, which is we've got people who have a process. Cleft is for the capture, and that's a starting point. This isn't for your live collaboration. I just mentioned we use Google Docs. We haven't stopped using Google Docs. But my primary writing place, and I've only got the tool relatively recently, a lot of the fun stuff that's coming, and it's already become my go-to writing editor. Which plan for me, I suppose, just to step it back up. What's it for? It's for writing, for authoring. It's for having a space that you can. I know we haven't got a share screen going here, but you've got an editor in front of you that's lovely and clean. It's native, it's local, and that's a big one to shout out about. This is offline, be local, and that includes the files, because that was one of the other big requests that was coming through from people, was making sure they can get access to it like Cleft does, and bringing these places all over the place. So my point is everyone's got a system, and we wanted to make sure you didn't have to learn or break your system. This slots in.
Yeah, I just want to like quadruple underscore something that we've always been about and continue to be about as we release and start like doing some beta testing with people. First of all, if you're interested in what we're doing with amber.page, if you're on a podcast client that allows for chapters, you probably already matched the link that's on this section on this chapter to check it out. But yeah, we want to just be a part of building for an audience that is neurospicy or neurodivergent, right? And we know that there is a space for verbal processors to get their ideas out into a written form. That's why we built Cleft, right? And now, once you've got something written down using Cleft, or maybe you didn't have the blinking cursor syndrome, the fingers typed it straight out for you, but we want to take that first draft and get it into that published draft form with you alongside. Because I think that there is so much space for technology that doesn't try to do too much. You started this section by saying, we've promised everybody that we're not going to make Cleft into the everything app. And we emphatically are not. We're going to keep iterating and adding little bits and pieces onto the edges of what Cleft is. If you're a customer, your subscription will continue to support its development. But we also want to be able to provide something for people that are wanting to smush that time to value between your first draft and your published draft. That's what Amber is for, right? And when we say, I know for me, like, why do I love Cleft? I love Cleft for that moment when I have blinking cursor syndrome, and it's I know I can talk it out. Okay, so then I do, right? Using Cleft. That happens for people that are like in the middle of writing. We want to unblock writers that are experiencing that moment in time where it's like, I'm not sure how to continue here. Well, talk to Amber, write with Amber. Use the same kind of loop that we have of getting you to process verbally, right? To be the thing that is the next paragraph or the next chapter or the next section or the next note that is going to help unlock that next piece of writing from you. Okay, so I want to just step back and zoom all the way out with you here, Jonny, as we
Before
conclude.
we zoom out, I
Yes,
didn't finish
please.
what the actual interface is, not to go into the nitty gritty. You've got a lovely space in front of you, which is the editor. We work by sections, which are pageless, honestly amazing editor to work with. And you've got reference notes. And you can ask Amber to help you with lots of different things, which sign up and you can find out more. But really simply, we just wanted to have something that's a beautiful native writing experience. That was the basis. Somewhere you can go off into the woods and write, disconnect from the Wi-Fi and get going.
Awesome. Okay, so let's zoom all the way out, Jonny, right? Because we started the year when Cleft was barely an idea in your head, and you cajoled Justin into being a part of the squad of building this next thing. And then by accident, it caught fire with the right online people, so that there's a whole bunch of people found out about Cleft really fast because of some interesting people finding out about us. So there's just this past history of Cleft, right? And then there is this like right now of Cleft and Amber, right? And there's maybe this future state that has maybe even more products. I guess maybe let's zoom out for us and think about what it is that Cleft as a company is even trying to do. Give us the before, during, and after of this moment in time. What are you doing, Jonny? What is Cleft doing?
That's a really good question. Let me try and give the most succinct version I can. Not going to happen. Cleft builds software and products for neurodivergent folks. That was our basis. That hasn't changed. There's a joke here about neurodivergent co-founders hyper focusing on particular problems and then solving them, and then working on making sure that we keep solving problems that we keep hearing from our base. We said we wanted to start from the edge case, not the mainstream, for a reason. But we're for everyone. That's the point. It's by us and for us. But we don't exclude. And that's been one of the most amazing parts that we've learned along the way. Go figure, if you build something for everyone, and you've heard me say this before, but I'll say it again. When you're building a house, everyone's got to be able to walk into it, roll into it, or fly into it. Whatever your jam is, that was our building bit. That was our foundation. And we're going to do that with any products we do now or in the future. To be clear, where I see this fitting in right now, where Cleft is my notebook and coming soon on my Apple Watch, Amber is my typewriter. I need them both in my life in the same way I have it right now, is I have my physical book here for doing things at work. We're multimodal, and that's the point. It's not one way or the other. And that's one of the things that we stand out. We have very strong opinions, but they're informed by the user. That's the point. Opinions can change, but we try and keep that with the interest of the user at heart. And we're doing our best to make sure we balance that the right way.
Well, it's awesome to hear you, Jonny, saying the same thing that was from the beginning, right? Is that we are building for people like us who need and want and will pay for a software that can be assistive for the way our brains work. to help us become a superhuman, as it were, by using the computer as a teammate. Turns out that computers can do stuff, Jonny, and it's really nice when software works with us instead of against us and is really trying to be in support of what we're already doing. So thank you so much for conceiving of Cleft in the first place and for finding Justin to help you draw us into this next phase that has Cleft and Amber and whatever it is to come. We appreciate you. I'm just saying this on behalf of the users, customers, listeners, that and we're grateful to be in this space where so many have chosen to trust us with their thoughts and ideas, right? And we're excited to be co-creating with them for now and into the future.
Look, it's something that I've heard from you and from Justin. Giving a damn matters. And that's why we work so well as a team and why we love serving our customers. So look, it's just awesome to get to talk about the stuff we're doing. It's humbling to get to do the work we do. But I think you just nailed it there. We've got a lot of responsibility on us. People depend on us. Okay, I'm a power user at Cleft. I think possibly the power user. Some people are just catching up scarily fast. But the point is, this matters to people. It's not just another piece of tech. We didn't set out, and the first thing we said was, we're not just building another thing that could be 10 different things of the same thing. This has an opinion. It has its own voice. It has its own blob, which is gaining its own personality as we've gone over time. Don't worry, the AI is okay. Blob is the interface of the app for anyone who's not familiar with it. And that's the point. We've got an amazing community building up around this, and we're looking forward to keeping building and getting better every single day, powered by them. Thanks, Tyler.
The Speak Easy podcast is brought to you by Cleft, the easiest way to collect your thoughts. With our cross-platform applications, you can simply capture your ideas wherever you are and paste them where they belong later. Check us out at cleftnotes.com. That's CLEFTNOTES.com. Thanks for listening as we think aloud together.